Hello everyone, my name is Jack. I'm part of the team here at Edumundo. And today I'm back again with a frequently asked questions slash feedback Q&A type of thing. And I'll be going over some of the steps that you should be taking in terms of mostly your analysis in the next round that you've completed. If you're watching this, that means you've probably already played one, maybe two, or you're just coming back to this video to take a look and see what improvements your team could come or company could make. I've logged into a demo simulation at the moment, but ultimately I'm going to show some of the steps that you should take. First of which is to take a look at your ranking, where you can, of course, see everyone else you're competing against within the simulation. This ranking is entirely based on the targets that you've selected. So if you want to take a look at the number of points you've earned for said targets, we're going to head into the Analysis tab. Under Analysis, we're then going to go to Score, and here we can see those points. Points received for achieving targets, but also points received for progress. Let's start off with the achieving targets, where we can see whether or not we've reached any of the targets that we've selected. Unfortunately for this team, we have not reached any of our targets, except for one, the lowest price. However, it has been set to the bare minimum. By setting the target to the minimum value, you will automatically score 0 points. So it's always important that you at least set one tab above the minimum when setting a target. But what's probably more useful information, though, is the points received for progress towards meeting targets. This will show your current achievement over the target level that you've selected. And here we can make some adjustments in order to score even more points in the next round. Let's take, for example, the achieve net profit. This could be a target that we want to change in the next round. And I would highly advise that you change and adjust your targets every single round. Of course, if you're doing well for a specific target, for example, low price, then you don't need to change it and instead only need to adjust. But let's say the achieve net profit target. That is something that we may want to change because we made a loss, and therefore something we may want to try and change to something that we can earn points for. We can also see that it's been selected as a KPI. This is really important as the KPI will multiply your score by 5 times. So let's say the KPI, instead of being on the achieved net profit target, was instead on the lowest price target, we could have scored an extra 480-ish, no, 460-ish points, 50 points, around about. We could have scored that many more points for this one target alone if it had been selected as lowest price. But instead, we've only got 90 because we came in 1.4, which is around first, maybe second place, because we were in multiple markets. We can see that because we had actually set the target level to 5, though, or 5th position, unfortunately, 0 points because it is the lowest level. This can be applied for all the targets, changing and adjusting them to whatever you think is going to be best for your company in order to earn the most points. And that could also mean reducing a target level. So for example, we can see that for the motivation of staff, the current target was at 86%. However, unfortunately, only achieved 82%, missing out on the 65 points that we potentially needed. However, if we had slightly lowered it down to 82 instead of 86, we could have scored 56 more points. So although we're sacrificing around 10, we're gaining 56, if that sort of makes sense. Of course, it may seem like minor numbers, but ultimately all of these minor numbers do add up towards your ranking. And it could be the difference between first and second place or second and third place. It could only be 10 points, 20 points, 50 points. Again, it is up to the other teams that you're competing against. But that's the first step of your analysis. I would recommend going over your targets and then going into that business plan and going into that targets and fine-tuning, adjusting, and changing all of those different options. In terms of the next step of your analysis, I would recommend heading to the dashboard or the homepage and viewing your analysis tool. On this analysis tool, it will highlight the severe problems, small problems, and if you're lucky enough and it's in green, there are no issues at all. The market represents all of the issues that are occurring within the market, and more specifically, why your demand is being affected in a negative way. If it's red, it is a severe impact. If it's in yellow, it means it's having a minor impact. So something that maybe could be improved, but doesn't necessarily have too much of an issue at the moment. Some of these you cannot have an influence on. So for example, being a new player in the segment, you're just going to have to last for 2 years within the market before this disappears. But other options such as the distribution method you've selected can of course be changed and can increase your overall demand for that specific market and specific segment. It will highlight, of course, a description, the market and segment where it's occurring, and also give a little bit of a hint or direction in terms of where you need to go and where you need to improve. Under financial, it will state whether or not you made a profit and maybe a few other items that should be taken into consideration, but also some inventory issues. So as you can see, one such issue could be over 40% of the demand could not be fulfilled, and therefore there's an extreme number of no sales. What this means is that there's not enough inventory to keep up, and therefore you're missing out on a lot of potential revenue. This also applies for the 15% in the men's market, but you could also see that although you may have made some okay to bad decisions, some of your competitors have not had enough inventory in stock, and so you're actually getting some of those sales from them. But in the next round, if they increase their stock levels, you won't experience the same demand. But these are all issues that you should try and focus on and will always be updated every single round. Other areas of analysis that you could also take a little bit more of a deep dive into is using the analysis tab. So for example, going back to more the market demand that you may have experienced, we're going to use the market tool. On this market tool, we can see the 3 segments: price, quality, customer intimacy, whether or not we've had sales, as well as the total demand. Let's say we take a look at the price segment, where we had 30,000 in sales. What we'll see is a load of numbers, and we're firstly going to focus on core score. On core score, this is essentially the needs and wants of a customer group. There is a factor or an indicator, and the higher the multiplier along this left-hand side, the more important this factor or indicator is for this customer group. So for example, 0.8 for the price compared with competition means that the price is very, very important to those within the price segment. What you can see is that the quality is maybe not that important, as it has a very low multiplier, and therefore you won't have a very good amount of points, even if you have a good quality, because ultimately the multiplier is very, very low. This is just an example for the price segment. If we have a quick look at the quality segment, we can see that there is different key indicators or similar key indicators with different multipliers. So again, you always want to think about the strategy you've gone with, but more importantly, the needs and wants of your customer groups that's in line with that strategy. Also, some other items within the positioning matrix is the multiplier on core score. These are all of the decisions that you've taken and whether or not they've had a positive or negative impact. For example, along the left, it will state the decision that has been taken, and along the right, the impact or the multiplier. The higher the multiplier, the greater the impact. And anything that is 1 and above is having a positive effect. So, for example, the focus, the sustainability policies, the website, all are having positive impacts on demand. Anything that is 1 and below, which is highlighted in yellow or red, are also shown in the dashboard feedback. So I would recommend that you use this page to instead improve even more on some of the decisions that you've already taken. One such decision could be, for example, advertising on the search engines and the budget you've allocated. And maybe others have set a higher budget, so maybe you want to increase yours even more. The final thing within this market tool, though, is the total score of all companies. Here you will see all of the competitors and their position within the market compared to your own. So, for example, the person or the team with a higher score will ultimately have the most demand and the most sales. Do keep in mind, if you want to see the names of said competitors, you will need to select a certain management activity in order to see those names. But if you want a more visual representation instead of a numeric, we have the positioning matrix. And here you can gain a little bit more of a holistic understanding as to what is occurring within the market and what strategies some teams may be going for, and potentially even try and spot some gaps in the market, for example. But that's about it in terms of everything within the market. There is also price developments that you can also track over the course of several rounds if you would like, and see whether or not teams are increasing or decreasing their prices, and then for you to then make better decisions. But there is also the internal results you want to take a look at. For example, on the balance sheet, we have the assets and liabilities, and ultimately you always want to have a positive cash position. If your cash reaches zero, such as this team, it pretty much means you've gone bankrupt and you're going to take out an overdraft, which is very, very costly and will get you into even more financial difficulty. So if that does happen, what I would recommend is that you get in touch with our help desk, which is in the top right-hand corner, which I'll go over at the very end as well. But some other results you want to keep an eye on is, of course, your income statement to see whether or not you've made a profit or a loss. And if you click the little I under the general administration expenses, you will see a list of all of the costs at the moment for your company. And maybe you want to increase or potentially even decrease some of these costs based on other analysis that you've conducted. There is also a cash flow statement, and on this cash flow statement, you can take a look at all of your expenses. Again, similar to the income statement, but just in a little bit more detail as to where all your money is going. But the two things that I do want to focus on a little bit more are the inventory and staff. Starting off with inventory, we can see a graph of your demand and supply over the course of the entire year in weeks. For example, we saw with this team, there was a high amount of no supply or no sales, shall we say, in the women's market, where 40% of the demand could not be fulfilled. So if we head back into the results, back into inventory, select the women's market, we can see those results. Demand, sales, decline, purchased, and inventory. There is this graph, but I actually prefer a table view. And on this table, it will highlight in red every single week where demand was not kept up with. So for example, in week 5, there was a demand of almost 360 units. However, there was 0 sales because there was 0 inventory in stock. And this is entirely down to the automatic order limits that have been set in the decisions, specifically the purchasing decisions. So how do we try and fix this issue? I would firstly recommend and take a look at what the peak demand was over the course of the year. So we can see the peak demand was around 1,862 units. We're going to use this information to now set better automatic order limits. So head into decisions, into purchasing, and here we can change and adjust some order limits. Firstly, you may also want to consider increasing your warehouse size. Maybe your warehouse is too small compared to the demand you're experiencing, or maybe you're trying to do business in multiple markets. Because again, all of these markets and all of these sales come from one warehouse. But let's focus on the women's market. There was a peak demand of around 1,800 units. At the moment, we have gone with a distributor that has a 3-week delivery time. And as you can see, the order low point is currently set to 1,000 units. What that means is that when an order is placed and when warehouse capacity reaches 1,000, only then is an order placed. And we've seen that that 1,000 does not last 3 whole weeks. So what you may want to do is increase that warehouse capacity in order for it to last 3 weeks. So for example, by setting an order low point of 4,000, what that means is that 4,000 units should hopefully last for around 3 weeks. Of course, maybe you'll see an increase in demand in the next round, so maybe not every single sale could be achieved, but ultimately this could be a good starting point. Once it does arrive, you are then purchasing the difference between this order low and order high point. So, for example, 4,000 units. This is probably the main way that you can fix your inventory problems, but the other, maybe more expensive way is to change the supplier. More specifically, changing to fast delivery, which has a 0-week delivery time. So you'll never have to worry about that calculation of lead time. But that's about it in terms of all the inventory stuff. The final thing that I'll be going over is the staff results, where here you can see how many staff have been hired, left, stayed, but also in yellow, these external employees. These external employees will be automatically hired based upon workload levels and the amount of demand you're experiencing, and whether or not you have enough staff members that you've hired yourself. If you haven't hired enough staff, they will automatically be brought in, and they are twice as expensive and only 70% as effective as staff you hire yourself. So it's really important you try and minimize this number as much as possible. And you can try and minimize that number by taking a look at some of the metrics just below, such as workload, motivation, and education levels, which are all impacted based upon the decisions that you make, but more specifically, your HR decisions. But that is about it from me. That is everything that I really wanted to cover. Of course, if there are any questions that I have not answered in this video, you can get in touch with our help desk and we should get back to you within 24 hours, usually between 6 and 8, depending upon the time of day. But just to quickly recap, all of the key areas that you should focus on when doing your analysis from the second round onwards is firstly, the ranking, checking your points that you've earned through the analysis tool and going into your score and seeing the points that you've earned and changing and adjusting those business plan targets. Go over the market analysis tool, take a look at why you achieved the market share that you did and what maybe improvements you could make. Then also go over your results, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, inventory, and staff, taking a look at some issues and problems, and again, where you can improve, and then change all of the decisions that are relevant to the issues and how you want to improve. By fine-tuning and changing, you're then also more likely to reach some of the higher levels of the targets, which in turn will earn you more points and therefore earn you even more ranking points. But that is about it. I hope everyone has enjoyed the simulation so far. If you do have any questions, again, get in touch with the help desk. But that is about it from me. And I hope everyone does much, much better in the next round of the simulation. And again, that's it from me. Thanks everyone for listening and enjoy the next round. Thanks everyone.